Hello everyone, welcome back to My Hero Academia Podfics. This will be the continuation of Burn Your Wings. This will be part 17, chapter 17, entitled The Last Straw. If you ask Izuku later, he'll blame it on Bakugo. Actually, he should have started out by blaming him. Izuku doesn't know why he didn't. Blaming Bakugo should be his default setting, because this is all totally Bakugo's fault. Yep, it happened like this. It's the last day of training before they leave for the provisional license exam, and though Aizawa told them to take things easy, everyone's geared up and putting the finishing touches on their new special moves. Izuku was no exception, and he decided to get Todoroki's help for the new fire-based technique he came up with. I still need practice stabilizing it. Could you shoot your fire and ice at me to see if I can hold it in different temperatures? Sure, that would help me with my training too. Todoroki agreed easily and started flinging his quirk at Izuku. I'm kind of surprised this wasn't already a special move. You do it all the time. Izuku weaved around the spikes of ice and columns of fire as he answered. I've actually never done it consciously before this training, and I got the idea to refine it from Kachan's. What was that, you rip-off? The roar came from above them, where Bakugo had been blasting at Ectoplasm's clones, and he seemed to have somehow overheard the tail end of Izuku's words. It's nothing, Kachan. Yes, it fucking was, you arrogant bastard. Copyright is a thing, damn it. What the fuck have you done this time? And then it just kind of spiraled from there. Bakugo, in his self-righteous fury, jumped down and invited himself into the fray, and suddenly there were explosions mixed among the fire and ice. And the thing is, Bakugo is a given, but both Todoroki and Izuku can be pretty competitive, and hot-headed too. So instead of doing the sensible thing and stopping, it somehow turned into a three-way fight, and they ended up all over the gym, blasting their quirks at each other and barreling into the other classmates in their chaotic grappling. And Class A, being Class A, instead of being mad at them, they were ecstatic. Oh my god, it's finally happening! Bakugo versus Midoriya versus Todoroki, the match of our dreams! Three-way firefight! Burn, baby, burn! Get the battle music going, Jiro. Quick, somebody bust out the popcorn. Sato! I know you have emergency snacks. This is grade A emergency. Yamomo, please, make me some 3D glasses. 3D glasses? Are you kidding me? Make me a goddamn camcorder. Pandemonium ensued as everyone went into hyper-excited, passive-aggressive spectator mode and crowded around to watch. Whistles and boos were equally abundant. Popcorn was thrown. That was dirty, Bakugo. Do it again. Come on, Midoriya, kill him. Kill him with fire. Ooh, looking cool, Todoroki. It got so out of hand that eventually Midnight and Aizawa had to resort to using their quirks before everyone calmed down again. Midnight found them hilarious. Aizawa did not. And now here they are, shoulders hunched and feet shuffling under Aizawa's long-suffering gaze. I take it this means that you're all confident enough for the exam tomorrow. Aizawa glares, and there's an undercurrent of, you all had better pass after putting me through this, or else. Class A shifts guiltily under the hero's threatening glare. And you three. Izuku cringes as Aizawa turns to him, Todoroki, and Bakugo. I told you not to overdo it today, to reserve your energy for tomorrow. Not only did you disobey, but what you did was dangerous, unsupervised, and you also disturbed the others' training. It's not like they're complaining, Bakugo grumbles, and Izuku shoves an elbow into his side in a vain attempt to shut him up. Aizawa narrows his eyes. No more training for you three until the exam tomorrow. And yes, that includes whatever you do in the kitchen, Midoriya and Todoroki. Izuku deflates at that. Even Todoroki, who had been standing there impassively, jolts a little, and looks like he's going to protest against the ban. Izuku tugs Todoroki's sleeve and minutely shakes his head, and Todoroki settles with a disgruntled but resigned air. Aizawa looks over them one more time before dismissing them. Izuku buries his face in his hands with a moan. Kachan! What? I got scolded. By Eraserhead. I'm never going to get over this. Oh my god, Kachan, I'm blaming this on you. Todoroki, who now knows Izuku's idolization of their homeroom teacher, pats his back. Bakugo has also been told that Aizawa was the one who saved Izuku and Inko, but he has no sympathy and just rolls his eyes with a scoff. I can't believe no training actually counts as punishment for you guys. Kaminari groans at the end of class as he flops onto the floor, and several others agree and nod, but it's someone else who responds. Oh, what's this I hear? Did Class A get scolded and punished? That's strange, and here I thought that you were supposed to be much better than us. Izuku lifts his face from his hands, and the now familiar manic laughter of Monoma. It looks like Class B has come to use the gym, and as usual, the boy wastes no time in taking a jab at Class A. Kendo sighs and makes an apologetic gesture on Monoma's behalf. and Class A, who've learned to more or less ignore the boy, just wave her off and prepare to leave the gym. Monoma doesn't even seem to notice that practically no one's paying attention to him, and keeps laughing maniacally until he spots Izuku. And if it's none other than the person who ended All Might! That makes Izuku freeze. Normally, whatever anyone says to Izuku tends to just bounce off him. Izuku can be viciously protective of his friends, but insults directed at himself rarely make any impact. Izuku has grown up to violence and cruelty, so schoolyard bullying just pales in comparison. But what Monoma said, that hits hard. The person who ended All Might. The media had exploded in the wake of Kamino, and while Izuku hadn't been targeted nearly as much as All Might himself, he'd still been thrown under that spotlight. There had been speculations about the relationship between the two, of course, but the press talked about Izuku even separately from his ties to the hero. One of the things they latched onto was how Izuku's kidnapping was the catalyst for the Kamino raid, and thus All Might's retirement. Despite their other wild ravings and speculations, this is one thing that is so painfully true that Izuku can't help but cringe. He ended All Might. He knew that. He knows that. But reading strangers talk about it online has a completely different impact than hearing it to his face by someone he knows. Monoma probably doesn't even know what a sore spot he hit, but it still hits hard. Izuku swallows thickly and forces himself to keep walking, until he sees All Might on the way out of the gym. Despite his injuries, the hero had been coming in from time to time to give the students advice on training, but he and Izuku had their interactions kept to a minimum, what with the speculations going around. There may only be UA staff and students going around, but it's best to be cautious when both of their safety is on the line. So as Izuku passes by, All Might only gives him a quick, secretive smile. Izuku plasters an answering smile on his face and brushes past. The days of the provisional license exam arrive. It's the first time Izuku has ever really been in a public area since Kamino. He'd expected the stares and whispers, but having expected it doesn't mean that he isn't seized by the impulse to hide behind Shoji again. But his friends are already a step ahead of him, and Class A casually groups around him, forming a protective barrier between Izuku and any potentially overly zealous questionnaires. Though Shoji does grin down at Izuku and pokes good fun at him again. We can always do another victory lap. Shoji, no. Come on, I won't let you down. Shoji, no! They do have a run-in with some students from Shiketsu, but soon enough they're all herded into a large room that opens up to reveal the stage for the first part of the exam. Everyone, let's stay together as a group, Izuku calls out to Class A. Each contestant has 3 targets on their body and is given 6 balls. If all 3 targets are hit, you're out, and you need to retire 2 people to pass. It's entirely possible to poach the 3rd target from someone else, too. The rules make it obvious that people who know each other will work together as a team, and UA is the prime target since their quirks were shown at the sports festival. It's only logical that they stick together. But, fuck off. What do you think this is, a picnic? And with that, Bakugo gives the rhetorical middle finger to Izuku's plan and runs off on his own. Izuku groans and facepalms. That's it. I'm blaming Kachan. Every time. For everything. Kirishima flashes Izuku a toothy grin and thumbs up before he and Kaminari run after Bakugo, though, so at least he's not completely on his own. Izuku looks around to find that everyone else, at least, is sticking to the plan. Even Todoroki. I kinda expected you to go off too, he comments as Todoroki keeps pace, staying close to Izuku's side. Not that I don't appreciate it, but your quirk is much better, in open spaces after all. Todoroki gives him a flat look. I'm done with you running into trouble without me. I'm not taking any chances. Izuku makes a face at that, but doesn't argue. But soon they're not given a choice, as Shindo, one they'd met earlier, separates them all from each other, from a giant earthquake that he makes. Deku! Uraraka calls, and Izuku instinctively pulls her to him. Uraraka touches him as soon as they're close enough, and with zero gravity and Izuku using his fire as thrusters, they're able to land pretty safely. Izuku coughs a little as the dust settles and looks around. It seems that only he and Uraraka have dropped to this part of the arena. He can only pull one thing at a time, so he hasn't been able to grab anyone else aside from her, separating them from everyone else. Izuku grimaces. Todoroki is going to have a fit. Are you okay? He asks Uraraka instead. The girl nods, looking around uneasily. The others? Izuku nods. We'd better try to find them as soon as possible. The fewer our numbers, the easier it'll be for other schools to pick us off. They're about to take off when a familiar voice shouts to them. Psst! Midoriya! Uraraka! Zero! Shh! The boy emerges from behind a pile of debris and joins them. Saw a bunch of kids from the other schools headed this way, he informs them in a hushed voice when he draws close enough. We could probably avoid them, or ambush them if we stay quiet. What do you say? Izuku considers it. On one hand, it's not a good idea to be ganged up on, and they really should find their other classmates. But on the other hand, they eventually need to engage if they want to pass. How many were there? I think a bit less than 10, maybe. So somewhere around 8 people. Their 3 against 8 is nowhere near good odds, but they do need 6 victims, 2 for each of them if they want to pass. He looks around at Uraraka and Sero and find them patiently and faithfully waiting for his decision. Their unspoken trust hardens Izuku's resolve. Avoid or confront. Find the others or pass the exam. Why not do both? I have a plan. Izuku has never been to an amusement park, but he does have a few generic notions about it. Thrilling rides, junk food, balloons, fun in general. The exam doesn't have any roller coasters or food stalls, but Izuku, Uraraka, and Sero have managed to get themselves some balloons. Living, breathing, squirming, screaming, terrified, human balloons. And it's a lot of fun. Uraraka skips merrily on her way, both of her hands holding a bundle of Sero's tapes, each one attached to a contester that's floating high, high in the air. The people are either yelling at them in outrage or screaming in terror every time a strong wind buffets them, but the distance and the tape over their mouths make it so that their voices barely even carry to the ground. Izuku's never been to an amusement park, but the mad, mad grin on Uraraka's face makes him wonder if this is what it would look like. If it was a demented, horror-themed amusement park, that is. He shares his sentiments with the others, and Sero doubles over and laughing while Uraraka gasps and declares, "You've never been to one? Then we're going to have to go together sometime." With that promise made, they continue on their way, cheerily waving their captive human balloons in the air. A few minutes ago, Izuku had acted as bait and lured the other students into a position. While everyone's already seen Izuku's quirk from the sports festival, they'd been expecting the bone-shattering force of one for all, and so were caught off guard by Full Cal's speed and precision. With that upper hand, Izuku had startled them and their surrounding area with a fence of fire, occasionally pulling back some people who had quirks that could get them away. And while they were distracted, Uraraka and Sero had thrown a net over them and captured them all. The 3 of them could have passed the exam if they had pressed their balls against the targets then and there, but they couldn't just simply pass. Plus Alsha, after all. So Sero had tied each of their captives with his tape. Uraraka stole their gravity so that they'd float, and Izuku used heat of his fire to create air currents. This resulted in their captives floating high into the air, far enough away from the ground that others coming to help or poach them would have a hard time reaching them unless they had telekinesis or flight quirks. These human balloons serve double purposes. The first is bait. They're high enough to be seen from a reasonably far distance, and anyone who sees this bizarre sight is bound to be curious, or flabbergasted, enough to come and investigate. If they're people from Class A, they can regroup. If they're people from other schools, well, more balloons. The second is a sort of storage. You see, you need to retire 2 people to pass, but while they have more than enough victims to go around, the 3 of them don't plan on passing just yet. Only the first 100 people will be passed, but the announcements let them know that there is still some considerable leeway. In that time, they've decided to look for their classmates and give help if needed, and Izuku can always pull down their victims and pass when they want to, like some kind of human vending machine. So here they are, with Uraraka bouncing merrily with a skip in her step, and her sweet innocent face stretched into a gleeful grin as she waves around handfuls of human balloons as if enjoying the terrified screams of her victims high above, and Sero and Izuku following behind her. What the hell? They turn at the flat voice to find Jiro, who seems to be the one who spoke, with Tokiyami and Asui. All 3 of them stare for a long moment. Tokiyami eventually covers his eyes with a hand. I should have expected this was done by one of us. It certainly is our brand of crazy, Jiro agrees. I wish I had my phone, Ribbit, Asui says as she puts a finger to her mouth with laughing eyes, and Sero nods vigorously. Izuku knows some of their classmates are waging a war on who can upload the best photo on the class chat room, and Uraraka with her demented amusement park balloons certainly would have been a top contender. It's too bad they're not allowed to have their phones during the exam. Have you met anyone else? Izuku asks. Tokiyami shakes his head. Not anyone from our class, no. And so they continue on like that, with the addition of Asui, Jiro, and Tokiyami. It's even easier to take down any hostiles that come after them and add to the balloons. They meet Hagekure, who had already used her invisibility to her advantage to easily take down an opponent, and decide they've done what they can and should pass the exam when the announcer calls out that 80 people have passed. Izuku uses his quirk to pull down their human balloons one by one, and by now most of them seem to be thoroughly exhausted from screaming profanities, or just plain screaming, it was kind of hard to tell, that there's little to no resistance. One person in particular seems to have struggled so much that the tape over their mouth has come off, but instead of shouting at them, he just flops belly up and gives them a haggard look. "Just end me now," he pleads hoarsely, and seems almost glad when Izuku presses the balls into the targets and lets him down. He collapses in a heap and hugs the earth where he lies, as if he never wants to leave the ground again. Once they've all passed using their human vending machine, they're led to a separate area where they find some of their classmates have passed already. Izuku brightens when he finds Todoroki. "Todoroki!" The boy turns to him, similarly lighting up at Izuku's familiar voice, though Izuku doubts most people would notice the difference. "Midoriya." Izuku grins as the boy comes over to them. "See? I was fine, even without you," he boasts jokingly. Todoroki purses his lips skeptically, but Izuku can tell from the way that his eyes are dancing with laughter that it's mostly for show. "This time," he allows, and Izuku rolls his eyes, admittedly more fond than actually exasperated. But then he stiffens. He casts his gaze around, but doesn't find anything out of the ordinary. "Midoriya?" Todoroki questions, and Izuku frowns a little. "Someone's been watching me. Not just now, but throughout the first part of the exam, too." Which says something about their skill. Even with the utter chaos going on, Izuku had still felt someone's persistent gaze following him every now and again. But he never found the person, like he can't now, which only makes him even more uneasy. "A curious fan?" Todoroki guesses, and Izuku shrugs helplessly. Todoroki gives him a look that's almost smug. "Catnip." "Am not." The next part of the exam is a rescue simulation. Someone on the planning committee evidently shares UA's fondness for extravagance and dramatics, because they go full plus ultra and blow up the entire arena. Professional members of the Help Us Company, or HUC for short, are masquerading as injured and trapped victims from the terror attack, and it's their job to rescue them. Unlike the previous part of the test, instead of competing against each other, this time the students are going to have to work together, regardless of what school they're from. It's best if they all split up the place where they're most useful, Midori explains, and everyone nods at his reasoning and does as he suggests. "You too," Midori says as he looks right at Shoto. "We don't need 2 fire users in the same place. It'd be better to spread out." Shoto hesitates. Logically, he knows Midori is right, but he can't help the part of him that insists that Midori is villain catnip, that stubbornly wants to stay close no matter how strong or capable the other boy is. He's torn between a sense of logic and, what, emotions? Instincts? Need? Something that wants to hold on to Midoriya tight and never let him go, never even let him out of his sight. Midoriya gives him a smile, as if he knows how conflicted Shoto is. And how does he always do that? And gently pokes Shoto's side. "Hey, I was fine without you during the first half," he points out with a huff. But like Midoriya knows Shoto knows Midoriya. He may roll his eyes and complain about the names Shoto calls him, like villain catnip or lightning rod for trouble, but he's never really truly averse to it. Midori doesn't bother to hide the quirk of his lips and the light in his eyes that's so unbearably fond. "I don't want your chances at passing to be diminished just because you're worried about me," Midori admits quietly, and while Shoto would argue against the just part, he understands the sentiment and appreciates how Midori is looking out for him too. He finally relents. "All right," he murmurs, and he can't quite stop himself from reaching out and brushing his fingers against Midoriya's as he passes by. "Stay safe." Midori just smiles back. "You too." And with that, they split up. It isn't long before Shoto runs into Yaorashi and Asa from Shiketsu. Just like all the other times they've met today, the boy's bright and enthusiastic expression turns sour as soon as he spots Shoto. "Endeavor, son," he spits out. Shoto's brow creases in reflex at that label. "What's your problem?" he asks. "Did I do something?" If Inasa was a test for recommendation to UA, they would have met, but Shoto doesn't remember him. To be fair, he hadn't remembered Yaoyorozu either for a while, since he'd been too focused on showing he won't use his fire to endeavor to have the attention to spare for any of the other students. It's nothing personal against them, but Yaorashi evidently has something against Shoto. And Yaorashi Inasa looks positively enraged at Shoto's question. "You don't even remember," he grits out. "As I thought. You look like you've changed a bit, but you're still the same as Endeavor. Your eyes have the same cold fury as him." Shoto's frown deepens, and he grits his teeth at being compared to his father, but he forces himself to think of Midoriya and all the conversations they've had. "We are not our fathers," and turns away from the other boy. He trusts Midoriya's words more than his. I don't know what your problem is, but save it until the exam is over. But that only fans his fire. Of course that's what you're concerned about. Results are the only thing you and Endeavor are interested, right? He sneers. You know what they say, like father, like son. And that makes Shoto's thoughts freeze, and his insides burn, because he'd never liked that saying in the first place, what with his hate for Endeavor. But now that he knows about Midoriya's father, that saying is as much of an insult to Midoriya as it is to Shoto. And Shoto can't stand that. He turns around slowly, facing the other boy. His voice comes out in a flat snarl. What did you say? Yaorashi flinches when he meets Shoto's eyes, and then he lets out a sneer, because those mismatched eyes burn with that same cold fury that he just mentioned, the same as Endeavor. It's okay, Izuku says softly. I am here. What are you doing, ripping off All Might? Show some originality, the HUC member barks at him, and Izuku blinks at the complaint. He'd been using those words ever since he'd stood between Enko and Hisashi, after all, and while it probably had started as a tribute to the hero, he'd been using it so regularly that he's thrown his own when his origins are pointed out. Class 1A of UA hadn't had nearly as much rescue training as combat training, for obvious reasons. With the League of Villains targeting them, they were the ones that needed rescue, so it only made sense for the school to focus on making sure their students could stay alive first and foremost. But Izuku still has plenty of experience with damage control. Hisashi had often left Enko so beaten and battered that she could barely move, and it was always Izuku who had to frantically try to patch up her injuries. And later, Enko had been too frightened that she might hurt Izuku more if she touched him, so he had tended to his own injuries too. And unlike that sausage stunt by Gran Torino, this time Izuku knows that this is a fake scenario, so he's able to keep his cool. For the most part. Because these ruins look too much like the aftermath of the Kamino raid for comfort. There had been victims that night too, innocent civilians and bystanders that caught up in All for One's devastating range, too injured or too trapped to get out. Izuku couldn't help them. And it wasn't because he didn't have a hero license, it was because he was weak. All he could do was try not to be a burden, and he couldn't even manage that. All Might couldn't fight properly because he was within range, and Izuku ended up having to be rescued yet again, putting his friends in danger too. His hands curl into fists. This isn't a real situation. These aren't really injured people, but it's similar enough to the nightmare of Kamino that it makes Izuku swallow thickly, and he vows it'll be different this time. It'll be different from now on. He lights up with full cowl and runs. Izuku works with people from other schools, deferring to the older students' judgment from time to time to make the most of his abilities and carry out rescue operations with others. Over here, calls a familiar voice, and Izuku looks over to see Uraraka. I can't reach him, the girl points out to a child that's stranded on top of some wreckage. Help? Of course, Izuku nods as he lights up with full cowl and brings down the HUC member. The girl rushes towards them once he gets down, crowding close as she checks the boy's fake injuries. You know, you don't have to pretend to be Uraraka. I would have helped anyways. The girl freezes, and then she slowly lifts her head to give Izuku a blank stare. You knew? Uraraka can now float herself for short periods of time without much penalty. She wouldn't need my help, and... Izuku frowns slightly. It's you, isn't it? You're the one who's been watching me. The girl blinks slowly, and then her appearance melts to reveal the girl from Shigetsu. She grins. You noticed? I'm so happy, she exclaims, putting her hands to her cheeks. Say, won't you tell me more about you? I'm Cammy. No, Izuku says slowly, tightening his hold on the confused HUC boy. If this person's quirk lets him turn into someone else's appearance, what's to say this is their real face? You're familiar, as if... The girl's cheeks redden and her eyes curve in delight. Izuku's eyes widen in realization. And then he bursts into flames. Aizawa shoots up from his seat. Stop the exam. The hero joke looks at him in confusion from her seat beside him. What are you talking about, Eraser? But Aizawa doesn't even hear her. He rushes towards one of the proctors in the stands, grabs their shoulders none too gently. Stop the exam. The proctor seems startled. What? Eraserhead? What are you... That right there, Aizawa snarls as he points to the beacon of fire blazing away in the arena, is a warning, a distress signal. We have to stop the exam. Aizawa's doing his best to keep calm, but the man only shakes his head maddeningly despite Aizawa's efforts. It's a rescue simulation. Of course he's sending up a beacon. I'm sure it's just part of the exam. I know my student, Aizawa roars, losing his patience. Midoriya may be a problem child, but Aizawa knows his kid well enough to know that he'd never use that flare. the one he used on the night he was kidnapped, for anything short of a real emergency. That means Midoriya is in trouble, that he needs help, that Aizawa needs to be there for him. Stop the exam, he hisses for the third time, and there's something like alarm in the proctor's eyes now. Because I'm going in there, whether you do or not. Midoriya. The name escapes Shoto's mouth like a breathless gasp, like a desperate prayer. The moment he sees those familiar flames clawing away to the sky, everything else gets abruptly and violently shoved out of his mind. His anger, fighting against Gang Orca, who's posing as the villain, the entire exam in general, all of that falls away. There's only one thing important to him right now. Midoriya. Shoto has to help Midoriya. He has to. He can't lose him again. Not again. Yaorashi, Shoto grasps the other boy's shoulder desperately. No matter what the boy may have said, it's still true that he's powerful, and Shoto can put aside any insult if it means getting Midoriya more help. My friend is in danger, please. Lend me your strength. The other boy knocks away Shoto's hand. What are you up to? Why would I? But the boy falters when he looks properly at Shoto. Shoto has no idea what he sees in his expression. Alarm, worry, desperation, protectiveness, fear. But his acidic look falls away. He almost looks lost, as if he's truly seeing Shoto for the first time. Shoto doesn't care what it is, as long as he gets him to help. Please, he repeats. For Midoriya, he's not above begging. Oh, no, not again. Someone from Class A breathes when they see the pillar of fire blaze into the sky. Including the USJ, this is the third time that beacon has been flared, and it never fails to make their heart clench in their chest. When the students of Class 1A look around, they see their understanding and fear reflected on the faces of each other because they know that the flare means something bad happened to Midoriya. There is a heart-stopping moment of alarm and fear before their faces harden in resolve. They nod to each other. Everyone, forget about the exam and get to safety, Ida shouts. This is a real situation, Hagakure adds. But the people from the other schools don't follow their instant understanding. What? What do you mean? What's going on? Is this a trick? Wait, I know, you're just trying to sabotage us. The crowd murmurs at the last accusation, but Class 1A bite back their frustration. Then, this is an announcement. There's been a villain attack. No, I don't mean Gang Orca. This is a real situation. Everyone help the HUC members and get to safety until the pros arrive. I repeat, this is a real situation. The announcement rings over the speakers, leaving people in shock. Wait, really? Is this part of the test? Villain attack here? Fear starts to set in as the students are faced with their first real situation. Everyone panics. Everyone except Class A. We have to move. Now, Asui stresses. Go, Uraraka shouts. They go. Aizawa hadn't even waited for the proctors to make the announcement before he vaulted over the fence and rushed to Midoriya. When he makes it to the site, he finds his problem child holding a crying child in his arms. It's one of the HUC members, but there's fresh blood gushing from a real wound, and he's crying in earnest. Midoriya is holding him in a comforting but also protective embrace. His eyes snap up as Aizawa approaches, and for the first time, there's a wariness in his eyes when he looks at Aizawa. Aizawa freezes. For all the time he's known Midoriya, he's never looked at Aizawa with anything less than pure adoration and respect. And while that had made him uncomfortable, he hadn't been prepared for how much it would hurt when Midoriya didn't look at him with the affection clear in his eyes. Midoriya? For some reason, the kid relaxes instantly at Aizawa's uncertain call. Sensei, he breathes in relief. It was Toga Himiko, he says in a rush. She took the appearance of Uraraka and the girl from Shiketsu. When I realized who she was, she took this kid as a hostage to try and escape. I managed to get him back, but I lost her, and she changed appearances again and ran away. Uraraka mentioned that Toga sucked out her blood during the summer camp, so I think that's her quirk. She can transform into someone if she has their blood. The words tumble out of Midoriya in a rush. Midoriya's hand is steady as he keeps rubbing soothing circles on the crying child's back, but Aizawa can hear the tremor in his voice. Sensei, when I was kidnapped... When Midoriya meets Aizawa's gaze, again his eyes are bright and wild with something bordering on horror. He swallows thickly. They took my blood. This concludes Chapter 17 of Burn Your Wings. Chapter 18 will be up next, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.